Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm curious about.
I'm curious about
building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about.
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
Before I'm going to try this new thing that I've learned from Melissa. Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Stop. Look, this is pro stuff apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's like a weird breathing thing that you do. I call it backwards breathing. Hi, welcome to the Curious Fox podcast. This podcast is for those who challenge the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Mislaw. And on today's episode, Effy and I are going to be talking about how to find safety and joy from your chosen families and relationships during uncertain times. Today is Election Day in the United States, and it feels like everyone on all sides from all political perspectives are on edge and are nervous. And more than any other election in recent time in the United States, this election feels deeply connected to values and personal experience and very divided ways of looking at the world. And I'm interested, you, Effy, have lived in different countries over the span of several decades. So what has been your experience with election time stress?
Well, frankly, I have never experienced this kind of election time stress ever in any country. And given this particular election, I'm watching from outside, right? I'm in a different country. And I can tell you, the world is watching you guys. It's like the world is looking at the States with, anxious breath, just waiting to see what happens. And I don't think, in my lifetime, which, is a mere blip in the history of the world, but that is all I have to go by. I have never seen this. I have never seen the world so focused on one election and the outcome feeling so relevant to, everyone's lives. So I thought it was because, even when this election stuff started when I was back in the US, I thought it was just because I was in the US and, because the US is my home or has been my home for a long time. I thought it was that. But now I'm outside, I realize, no, it's like that in every country. It's like that in Europe. It's like that in Asia. It's just like everyone's waiting for tomorrow's results. And then,
no pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure, US.
Yeah, exactly. Do the right thing, people. Well, I can tell you though, personal election anecdotes. My home country, elections are usually shit show, and it's not even worth unpacking. Moving on, UK, very civilized as you can imagine. In the UK, we only campaign for 6 weeks prior.
Wow.
You can't campaign like you do here. Like there's none of these like
a year in advance.
And,
yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. I've heard so many people say Trump has been campaigning the day after the inauguration. Like he just started campaigning again, which I totally get. Yeah, in the UK, you get 6 weeks of it, and it's very civilized, and voting is low, actually. Well, the voting is low because UK politics are very just barely off center, whichever way you go. So it's that. And I get to vote in a couple of countries. I'll tell you what, though. I'll tell you one vote that I didn't vote, and I do regret deeply, is the Brexit vote. I should have gone to the consulate. I should have casted my vote. I did it purely out of, not apathy, but like, I thought that referendum was crazy. I thought it was like, I was like, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of proverbial column widths and news cycle. It's just like, it's a waste of my attention. I was so deeply like, this is just a waste of time all around. And I didn't vote. I was like, I'm not going to vote. It's crazy. It's not worth going into Manhattan for that stupid vote. Obviously, it's not going to happen. And then I woke up the next morning and I was like, wow, what has just happened? And I'm an idiot for not voting.
That was the 2016 elections in the United States. So many people did not vote. And then to your point, because they were like, that's crazy. That's not going to happen.
I know.
You regret it now.
Yeah, I hope this hasn't happened this time around. I'm hoping for my future self this hasn't happened, but I do. It's one of those. I'm guilty. The reason why Brexit happened is because people thought like I did, and young people didn't vote. And I am guilty. I am guilty. I do feel regretful. So, moral of the story: if you can vote, vote. Whatever it takes, people.
Yeah. I was watching the news, which is very limited nowadays. I consume very little bit of news. I have like read a few articles in the morning, watch a little bit in the evening, and that's it. There was footage of a woman who was very senior voting, and she was emotional about it and after she cast her vote, she said, "I mattered. This means that I matter." And I just those moments you're just like, oh yeah, like people, it's just a continual reminder of what a privilege this is, and to be able to have voice. And I hope that's reflected. We'll see. This will come out on Friday.
I'm glad we record like in advance, because I have no idea. So this is actually today is November 3rd.
Yes,
we're recording on Tuesday, and it is the election day.
Yes.
I know that you voted yesterday, or you voted early. Good for you.
I did. And we'll see. I mean, I have listened back to our March podcast where we're like, there's this thing called COVID. Like that's says we got to be indoors for like 2 weeks. That'll be crazy. And then, so I'm sure I'll listen to this a year from now and just be like, oh, past Jackie, if you only knew. Yeah. Well, since this podcast is going to be released a few days after the election, and since our social media podcasts and Slack channels have been filled with political discourse, I don't know if we should spend too much time talking about the election. I think that we want this podcast to be a place where people can change the noise, where you come here for a little reprieve potentially from some of that tension. What we will talk about is how to live and love during this time of global unease and unrest. I mean, according to studies, both scientific and anecdotal, people across the globe are experiencing high levels of stress and fear and unhappiness, and it's impacting the way we're showing up in our relationships.
Absolutely. I think this came up for us from the last Freakonomics episode, podcast episode about the hedometer, the happiness measure, right? And they were saying that we are the saddest we've been in decades. So, I mean, I definitely see that from my clients. For sure. I mean, anecdotal, but a lot of my clients are experiencing the stress they're experiencing externally is reflecting within the relationship dynamics. And I can tell because things that they were focused on, before it was a lot more to do with, where the relationship is going and open relationships and how do they transition into an open relationship and how do they, start dating, and maybe we're sort of navigating through those like first few dates that people are going and, all that kind of stuff. And now we're essentially most of the time stress management. Like we're doing most of the work that we're doing is emotional regulation, stress management, and just trying to sort of figure out what survival mode looks like, where, without imploding the relationships, which is a very different place than like the focus is very, very different. Yeah. Is what I'm saying.
No, it's true. It's true. I was listening to another podcast yesterday that was talking about how gun sales and ammunition sales in the United States have skyrocketed over the last few weeks. And people on both sides of the political aisle are arming up because there is palpable tension and fear in the air. And as we know from the conversations that we had with Angie Gunn around oppression, repression, and suppression, and all the ways in which the ways that we have power with or power over in society can show up and seep into our homes. To your point, the fear that is happening outside of our homes is seeping into our spaces. And same with my clients. I'm seeing people and my own relationship. I'm seeing myself be like, what did you mean by that? And what is that? And what that I love you seemed like it had tone in it.
Yeah. Right. Like, why haven't you been saying it all day? Huh? Why now?
Exactly. Right. What did you do? What's going on?
Yeah.
No, but I'm having like breakup dreams. I'm having, I won't hear from a partner for like an hour. And I'm like, clearly they have gone on OkCupid and met someone and have fallen in love within that hour. That's clearly what's happening. That's what's, while I'm on this podcast, that's what's going on. And I'm very aware that these are irrational thoughts, but I am aware of them because I'm aware that when I start to feel unsafe, that it starts to show up in my relationships. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. How to feel safe and find joy in our relationships and our chosen families so that we can navigate through the coming months with some sense of hope and love and comfort. That's the goal.
Let's start with setting the scene and breaking down how fear outside of our relationship translates to fear inside of our relationships and inside of ourselves, and how each of us reacts differently with those stressors. This really kind of correlates to attachment that we talk about a lot, which is one of the sort of really important dynamics within relationships, right? And attachment there's kind of two aspects to attachment. For those of you who are new to attachment theory, it's essentially how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about the other person and our sense of safety in the context of a relationship. Is what sort of attachment is. And then there are, in an ideal world, we have a secure attachment system, which means that we feel that we can connect with somebody and feel at ease in intimacy or intimate situations. We neither feel that the other person or people threaten us or feel like overpower us in those connections. And should those connections erode, should those connections end, we don't feel that we lose a sense of self or a piece of ourselves, that we still feel whole, though we, of course, can experience sadness and loss and grief. Those are normal human emotions, but we don't feel a loss of sense of self or a fundamental loss of safety within ourselves. So that's sort of secure attachment system. So for those of us who don't have a secure attachment system, we have a few options. If you have an insecure attachment system, you have a few options. Sometimes we can show up as anxious attachment. That in layman's terms, we say things like, this person is needy, this person is clingy. And within ourselves, we might feel an intense sense of a fear of abandonment. That kind of what anxious attachment feels like. And then there is avoidant. Somebody with an avoidant attachment system is kind of, I think in layman's terms, we can say they're aloof. We can say that they have intimacy problems. We can say they're commitment phobes, right? Those are kind of the layman's terms, the labels that we stick on people. Sort of how you might feel if you have an avoidant attachment system is, interestingly, you may not know. That is the magical trick with an avoidant attachment system, is because you are avoiding attachment, because you are avoiding connection, means that it's likely that you have an avoidant tendency, which means that you might actually be avoiding knowing that you have an avoidant attachment system. However, if you can sort of check in with yourself, what you might find is that you have what they call a fear of engulfment. So if you have fear that once you're in a relationship, that you kind of get sucked into a relationship and you somehow lose, or that you have a fear that you will lose a sense of self, that you will kind of lose where you end and the other person begins, and you kind of have to please the other person all the time at any cost, and that's scary to you, and because of that you avoid relationships, or you keep people at arm's length, the chances are you might have an avoidant attachment system.
And so if this is you, if you, so let's say what this looks like, I guess, because oftentimes these two types of folks are also attracted to each other. So one way of characterizing it is the turtle and the octopus. So there's the turtle who in conflict goes inside. And so assume, for example, that you are not with your partner and there is maybe a text exchange and there's some tension there. The avoidant attachment style maybe says, I can't deal with this right now, gets consumed with work, does other things, hours and hours pass, and they don't even look to their phone. They don't even think about the person. They don't think about the situation. They get consumed with other things because in their mind, they're like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this stress or this energy. I'm just going to avoid it. And they go kind of internal. And the octopus is likely looking at their phone every 10 minutes, waiting for a text, waiting for a message, ruminating over the conversation over and over because the anxiety around, can we connect again? What's going to happen? What's this going to look like? It is the turtle will fall asleep in the middle of an argument. The octopus will want to argue through the night until 3 a.m, until they feel safe and sound. And so I generally show up as anxious, the anxious octopus. Where are you on that spectrum, Effy?
So I am a recovering insecure attached person. So, okay, let me just break down a few things before I out myself as my attachment style. So first of all, most of us are kind of fluid. It's not like you're stuck in one place.
Yep.
Even the most secure of us may find themselves in situations where they might feel anxious or avoidant, depending on how they're feeling about themselves, how they're feeling about their environment. So right now, for example, I can imagine the most secure of the secure person might feel insecure because they feel insecure in themselves or in their lives, right? So many people have lost of their livelihoods and, there's general tension. So, there's so many factors and it's there aren't that many people that are like secure at any given moment in any given situation. So it's just worth mentioning, like these things shift, though we of course all have tendencies. And so the secure is on one side and then the insecure folk can bounce. I definitely oscillate. Depending on the situation, I can be avoidant and I can be anxious, and I can swing.
You're an insecure chameleon.
Exactly. And what I see a lot actually with clients who are in multiple relationships, the open folk are the same person can show up as anxious in one relationship and avoidant on the other at the same time.
That's very true for me. That makes sense.
Tell me more about that.
So I think that when I feel to what you shared earlier, as if I'm going to be engulfed, when I feel like someone is trying to consume more of my time, attention, or energy than I have to give, I begin to shut down and pull away and go inside and push them back. And when I feel like they have pulled back, it's almost like a dance. That's how I would describe it. If I feel like the person is pulling back, I lean in. If I have felt like the person is leaning in too much, I lean back. And certainly over, the years and lots of work, I do much better at that. But that is, I think, my default tendency is to connection is very important to me. So I'd rather meet in the middle, but I will certainly lean all the way in if I feel like the person is pulling back. And, one example is like with my daughter, because we don't have a lot of time together, when she's here, she wants a lot of my time and energy. And I have to be very mindful because I can feel myself feeling engulfed and wanting to like pull away from her. And I have to then talk myself through it and help her realize that she's safe and we're good and I'm good and, all those things. So I think my default is probably anxious. And I think that I'm a switch, I'm a swinger, if you will, in terms of I can go either way. But I'm better at it. Yeah. So you oscillated depending on the relationship. Was there a particular default or it really did depend?
It really does depend. I think the that dance that you're describing, which is it's for people who calibrate to the other person, right? Like that's where the oscillation comes. So exactly what you described. So depending on what was going on with whomever I'm with, I would lean in or lean back.
Yeah.
I think the work that I've done allows me to stand in my own center. And not lean in or lean back. I think that's kind of the difference now. And of course, like it's a good day. That's a good day. And really you're just counting the good days. I mean, at least that's my experience. So I just count the good days, and there are definitely days where I'm, leaning in or leaning back or clinging or shutting down but the work for me is to be able to stand in my own center and not lean. And even when the other people are leaning, and sort of have nice healthy boundaries, which means like I'm not getting pushed off my center. That's when you find your center, when you're able to stand in your center and your power, or whatever you want to call it, whatever language that makes sense to you. The important thing is what maintains that equilibrium is good boundaries around you, good, healthy, gentle boundaries around you, where you're able to maintain that. Having said that, as I said, those are good days.
Yeah.
On bad days, I think I tend to be avoidant, to be honest. I don't tend to get clingy, but I do, I can get avoidant. And by the way, this avoidance style shows up in kind of two iterations, if you will. There's the fearful avoidant, and there's a dismissive avoidant. And dismissive avoidant is they're more sort of isolationists. They're solo. They like to be alone, and they can be emotionally distant, and there could be a lot of ambiguity, a lot of ambivalence in the way they show up. Whereas somebody who's fearful avoidant, they could just be kind of unpredictable, and they can have internal conflict. They can kind of be okay one minute and then kind of exploding in the other, because they're not communicating their boundaries. So they kind of tolerating but not really tolerating. They're kind of just putting off, and they're because they haven't been dealing and they haven't been processing. They're kind of avoiding the situation because it feels scary, and then at some point it's just too much because they've let it go on too much. I've definitely hung out in that sort of quadrant in my life, that's for sure. And it's it's you kind of people pleasing until, or you're kind of not dealing. I wouldn't say people pleasing. You're kind of not dealing until it's exploding in your face. I think I tend to lean on the avoidant stuff when I'm not taking care of myself, and I'm not kind of reminding myself that I'm safe, and defining what safe is.
And I wonder if, I believe the woo-woo in me, which there's not much in there, but there is some, believes that these types of attachment styles find each other for a sense of healing. So that I remember when my wife and I were going to you, and we were in the midst of our struggle several years ago and meeting with you. And I expressed how it felt like I was bleeding out. I was in such visible and obvious pain, and it looked as if she didn't care. It looked as if it didn't matter. And you shared, no, she's bleeding internally. And that was a really powerful awareness. And I think for all of us who are trying to figure out now how to be around each other and be whole and feel healed in the midst of this chaos, those are some things to keep in mind, is that even if you're with someone who looks like they are doing okay, they may be internally bleeding. And even if you are the one who are, that you may not be the only one. If you're the one out there bleeding out, that you may not be the only one. I love what you said about you finding your center. It reminds me of Sari Cooper in Consider This, our event last year, in November of last year. She talked about how if you are leaning forward or leaning back, that's unstable. That it's only when you're standing to your, standing on your own 2 feet, that you won't be rocked, that you won't slip and fall. And that visual has always also stuck with me, that right now I think that we are either leaning into people or leaning away from people. We started off talking about politics. I think that's true there as well with our individual camps. We're really leaning all the way into a particular rhetoric or pulling all the way away from another rhetoric. And in many cases, it means that we don't feel stable. We're not standing on our own 2 feet. So how do we do that? If we are in a place right now of feeling scared and insecure and worried and not filled with hope, and that is showing up in conflict in our relationship, or it's showing up that we are either being clingy or being avoidant, that we're picking fights or avoiding fights. Let's talk a little bit how to navigate through that.
Sure. I think that's really crucial that we do that. But I do want to bring in something that about being center, and because what comes up for me is a lot of partner dancing, if you want to do the salsa or swing or whatever partner dancing, a lot of the time the couples are lean into each other, and there's a lead, and then you're supposed to kind of lean, the follow kind of leans in and follows, which is great for dance. It's a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of partner dancing. When I think of the healthy version of that within relationships, and that kind of both parties being in their center and really feeling strong, I think of flamenco. if you don't know what flamenco dancing is, just YouTube it. It's amazing.
Gorgeous.
It's like just beautiful. And partnered flamenco dancing, both parties are kind of very much standing in their power. There isn't as much kind of leaning in going on. It's just like, it's strong and it's powerful and it's flamboyant and it's gorgeous. And all parties are like very much in their center of power, and they sort of dance around each other, and they sort of rely on each other for the aesthetics. But if you were to remove one from the other, they would still remain. And from a dance point of view, also their dance would, like, if you had some sort of editing powers, and if you watch a partnered flamenco dance, and you moved one part, like you removed one partner, and you just watched one at a time, it would be equally like mesmerizing. It's just one of those dances that you kind of. So anyway, when I think of like standing in your own power and sort of being strong and living your full expression, I think of flamenco dancing. And yeah, let's figure out how do we flamenco dance
like flamenco? Yes.
Yeah. How do we dance the flamenco in our partnerships?
Well, part of it, I mean, let's just stick with the analogy. I think part of it is just learning the steps, like learning the steps on your own and then learning how to dance with the other person. So stepping into your own power, knowing the things that bring you joy. And let's break that down, because I am not interested in, I think that there's a lot to be said about inspirational quotes on t-shirts and Instagram. And at the end of the day, when I am exhausted and, cannot see the light, that quote, it does me very little good. And so let's start with like sleeping and water and eating, right? Like that we like are taking care of the machine that is holding us together. So that's pieces of it. But even it is just frankly giving ourselves permission to find some little bits of joy. Like, so if you want to go on TikTok and that makes you feel lovely and good, if you want to eat that grilled cheese sandwich, if you want to take the time to make a poached egg instead of a scrambled egg, do the thing. Like we each deserve to spend a few more minutes doing whatever the thing is that is going to bring us some sense of light and joy right now.
Yeah. And being intentional about it, like thinking about what that is and doing it. And I think right now, one of the things, again, the numbers are astounding. I wish I had them at my fingertips, but there is an incredible rise in depression and anxiety right now, just individual experience. And that's making it harder for people to take care of themselves, never mind taking care of each other, but like taking care of yourselves. So if you're finding that you can't find those pieces of joy, be mindful, be mindful and see, is it just like you're being absent-minded and not doing it? Or if you're like really struggling to find moments of joy, like you really can't see any glimmer of light or hope. And it all feels like, my depression feels like, this is the way I describe it a lot of the time, is kind of, you're in the bottom, like you're at the end of like a deep hole and you're looking up. There's like a tiny little outing and there's like a bit of light out there, but it just feels like just too far. So whatever, any kind of feeling like that, just be mindful of your mental health. And if you can't find that joy, if you can't find any hope, you feel like you're scared all the time, you feel like you're tense all the time, you might want to seek some professional help. So yeah, and then if you don't, if you feel like your mental health is in a good place, but you're not making time and space for bits of joy, it's worth it.
Yeah, I was in therapy on Friday, and at some point in the conversation, he said, "There is no light at the end of the tunnel. You have to be the light."
Oof.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, all right, well, that's a good way to start this session.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that from like as a depressed person. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's strong. I was just like, whoa, right. Sure.
Oh, I think, well, what, and why I think that was important in the context of the therapeutic conversation was we are going to take the space together to figure out how you can be the light, that you're not waiting for someone to save you or for some light to come, that you are going to seek that out, that you are going to find the light, that you are going to be the light. And so then that we spent the rest of our conversation talking about just that. Where are the places of joy, of laughter, of connection? And there's a lot, frankly, that we can learn from polyamory as it relates to building community that meets our different and various needs to find that joy. One of the things that I love doing that I very rarely do is art. So I studied art in school many, many moons ago and did not pursue a career in the arts because I did not want to monetize something that felt like it brought me joy. And I was, I've joked with Effie that Canva now is my art expression. Making like Instagram posts and memes. That is the way I express my art and my color. But my sister,
and it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
my sister is an artist. My sister has a solo show now in Soho. She creates beautiful, gorgeous work around the New Yorican experience. It's the New York Puerto Rican experience and what it was like to grow up in that space. And she has these like gigantic wall size artworks that when you walk into the gallery, it feels like you're in like someone like a grandmother's home. Like she's like big pieces. And I invited her over a few weeks ago to have an art day. We went to Michael's, a surprise store. We bought canvases and wood and paint and glue with no concept of what we were going to do, and just like threw all the supplies on the floor, and then just like ordered burgers and painted and joked and laughed, and like by the end put up just like this wall of art that we had created that day.
Nice.
My partners would not be interested in that kind of stuff. And so it takes sometimes thinking about what brings you joy and how can you build a community, multiple partnerships, multiple types of relationships, multiple levels of engagement that meet those different needs and that bring you those little sparks of joy.
Absolutely. I think connection is medicine. I think it doesn't necessarily mean that you are in romantic relationships with people, but having an extended intimate circle, an extended sort of community, a micro community of people that you feel connected to and you feel that you want to support and they support you. There's a mutuality. There's intimacy, and intimacy comes in so many different shapes and sizes. I think that's so important. And I think a lot of the, when you talk to people, when you talk to polyamorous folk, the very broad distinction between polyamory and open relationship is that polyamorous folk tend to lean into the relationship side of things, and people who identify as open relationships, they tend to lean into the sexual exploration of relationships, and they tend to be in sort of like pair bonded or they tend to be in dyads and open dyads where they explore sexually with other people. So when you kind of look at the polyamorous folk, you see in the sort of the healthy dynamics, you see a support network, you see an extended family, you see what I like to call a micro community of people who are interconnected to each other. And I think there is comfort in that, and there is safety in that. Yes, there is like love and romance and potentially sexual exploration in that, but there's also these like very basic human needs in there. And I think you don't necessarily have to be polyamorous to have that in your life, but there's definitely lessons to be learned on how to set that up and how to maintain that, for sure.
Yeah. So here's an exercise that you can do right now or at the end of this podcast. Grab a piece of paper, go on a whiteboard. If you're like me, you have a whiteboard, you have flip chart paper, you got paper everywhere. Go to a notebook and draw out a web, put a circle in the middle, put your name in there and start to web out what are the different things that bring you joy. Being near the ocean, doing art, watching horror movies, cooking, whatever it is, just start like mapping out. These are all the things that make me smile, that bring me some sense of joy. And then start to think, well, who else in my life likes these things? Who could I reach out to that would watch a scary movie with me via, Zoom, or that would come over for an arts day, or whatever that looks like, that would cook with me online or in person, and just start to build out first, what are the things that you need to do to help yourself recharge your battery? I often say to my daughter, towards the end of the day, I'll be like, I'm at 3%. I mean, that phone language is language that she understands. So I can be like, there's 3% left, and then I got to recharge. What are the things that help you recharge? Write those things down, and then start to think about who in your community, in your connections, in your family, in your chosen family, in your friends, out of your partners that can do those things with you, or where you can do them on your own and you can meet new people or do it all by yourself.
Totally. Let me just step back for a second and tie some of these ends together, because we talked about attachment and we now sort of moving on. I think it's important to make that bridge for people. So the reason why we ended up talking about attachment is because in the current climate with unrest and sort of a lot of unknown, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of us are feeling unsafe. We talked about that. And that feeling of unsafety and that feeling of, not knowing what's coming and maybe not feeling secure in yourself for whatever reason, understandable reasons, can reflect within the relationship dynamics, often showing up as attachment struggles. So when you feel unsafe and when you don't have a great sense of self, you're going to show up as, you may show up as insecure attachment, right? We talked about that. And that can look like that you either, very crudely put, you might either want to cling to your partner because you feel unsafe and you're sort of looking for a sense of self. And, you're the octopus, you cling. And then because you cling, you might be activating or triggering the other person to shut down or extract themselves, right? Pull away from you. And those dynamics can come up, back and forth within a relationship, right? As we said, it could shift, one person can be one way and then it could shift to the other way. And I think it's really important from that place to know what to do, right? And this could be in, this is the same as monogamy or non-monogamy, right? This can show up in multiple relationships. It's not just dyadic, right? It can be between two people as a relationship dynamic, but it doesn't, it's not like, monogamous people are secure and non-monogamous people are insecure. That's not how it works out. It's just like how you're showing up in those relationships. And if you don't handle it, and we were just talking to some of the ways that you can handle it. If you're not handling it, it's just going to exacerbate the attachment stuff that's showing up in your relationship. It's going to erode trust, and it's going to erode sort of healthy dynamics, and it's going to actually lead. It's actually going to lead you towards the thing that you're most afraid of, right? So those of us who are not feeling safe and feeling insecure and sort of clinging to our partner because we're afraid that they will leave us and we'll be left alone and we can't fend for ourselves, like these stories that come up in our head. By sort of clinging, by being the octopus, you will push that person away, right? And the person that is on the avoidance side and not having conversations and they're kind of shutting down because they're so worried that they're going to lose a sense of themselves, they're going to get too close, or it's going to be uncomfortable, they're going to exacerbate the anxious person on the other side. And it's going to, they are going to be clung to more and they are going to be agitated more. So it's really important that we handle this stuff. And it's also really important to name some of this stuff, right? It might not be, the chances are the highest possibility that how these dynamics are playing out isn't personal. It's not about your partner. It's not about how they're showing up. It's just how you're feeling within yourself and how you're reacting to what's happening around you, especially right now. So it's really important to kind of have that moment of self-awareness and not a moment, but have a practice of self-awareness and to sort of figure out, what's going on with me, how I'm feeling, and see if you can figure out whether these feelings are correlating to the present time, i.e. like what's happening right now in this moment and with the person in front of you, or is it as a reaction to your sort of broader environment, or is it something that's coming in from the past? So I just wanted to kind of like connect these bits and to now, like, okay, what are the things you can do if this is what's happening in your life?
Yeah. Do you want to hear a story?
Always, by the way. Especially from you. Of course I do. Let me just settle into my seat.
So yesterday, of course, there's the tension leading up to the election and the work that I do outside of the Curious Fox space. I am a coach, and so I work with people one-on-one, and I am the place where people share their anxieties and come looking for support and getting hope. I also work with social justice organizations in supporting them with increasing their impact in the movements. And so my days essentially are filled with either helping people navigate through hardship or virtual schooling with my daughter, which feels like navigating through hardship. And after like a super long day of that, then I had like this really rough conversation with somebody. And at the end of the night, ended it by calling my partner and spent the first like 5 minutes essentially just like these are all the things that happened, and this thing and this thing. Can you believe they said this? Da, 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 da. Like essentially doing my monologue. And she does a very good job of just like having an audience to my monologue, just sitting back in the theater and listening. And I had not told her that when I was done with my monologue, that there was going to be time for audience interaction. That normally I do my monologue and like, you know, she like pauses or responds or whatever, like pats me on the head or gives me a hug or whatever that is, and I can move on. This particular night, last night, I, at the end of my dramatic monologue of all the things, wanted her to validate that was they should never have said that to you. That's crazy, or that's wonderful. That's amazing. And she didn't do those things. And I was not happy about that. And so she just was like looking at me and I was looking at her. This was taking place over Google Duo. And we were looking at each other. And I was just becoming increasingly annoyed, waiting for the audience interaction part of the show. And at some point I was like, are you just going to stare at me? Are you just not, did you not hear what I have to say? She's like, no, I heard you. I heard that sounds like a lot. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. Well, I want you to respond as you would normally respond. Do you have a joke? Do you have a question? You're not curious about my day? Do you have not any follow-up? And she's like, I mean, I don't. I was just listening. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to go then. And I hung up. And then 10 seconds later, I'm texting her madly. Well, I don't understand why you had nothing to say. And what does this mean? And then a few minutes later, I call her. And that conversation ends with me being like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go to bed. To which a few minutes later, I start texting her and then I call her back and I'm like, you know what, then like, why do we keep doing this? We should just. And so I was very much playing into.
Yeah.
And the more that I was like, I need you to validate me. I need you to name the things that I am scared of are scary. I need you to name the things that happened are bad. I need you to name. The more, frankly, she was like, I need you to get the hell away from me. Now, she was saying that with her eyes. She knows better not to say that with her mouth. But she just became more and more avoidant the more and more clingy I became. The turtle like went further into its shell and I was just extending out my tentacles, like trying to get closeness. And finally was able to get enough into my wise mind and remember and realize this pattern that was happening. And we did end it on an okay place, went to sleep because that's actually the thing that I needed. Because at that point it was probably midnight. Woke up early, meditated this morning, had some tea, had some quiet time, focused on the things that I needed to do today and getting myself organized, ate something, like did the things I need to do to take care of myself, and then thought about what are the moments of joy that I want to have today. So I decided with my daughter that we're going to do an art project later after work is done. We're going to order Mexican food as opposed to me cooking tonight. That's going to bring me joy. And so I mapped out my morning to focus on what do I need to do to feel whole and feel joy. And then by the time she woke up and we connected via text, I was in a better and different space and we could be our partners again with each other.
Sure.
And so I, again, to connect it to what you were just saying, that happened yesterday and this morning. And so it's a very real, like what happens on the outside impacts what happens inside of our bodies, which then impacts what happens in our relationships. And the only way out of that is to like recognize it, like meditation. When you start to like think your thoughts, you have to like catch yourself and come back to your breath. You just got to catch it and come back to center.
Yeah. The two things stood out for me. One is Google Duo. Love that you're challenging the status quo here. Good for you. I like how you're rolling. I mean, honestly, the other thing is you're absolutely right. Like what you just described is very much happening in so many homes.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your story because I know so many people are like, my God, that was my last night too, So yeah, it's happening. It's happening. A good pro tip, by the way, have a curfew for important conversations and processing. I actually think 11 p.m. is a good curfew for any big conversation. And, if you're at past midnight having a big conversation, I can guarantee you're not going to have it resolved. It's just gonna descend into like an endless spiraling emotional mess and no one's going to win. So normally with my clients, the clients that have these like up till 3 a.m. trying to figure out, whatever they're trying to figure out. I'm like, I have never seen an argument, a discussion, a conversation end well at 3 a.m. I just haven't seen that. If that's my experience, I've just never seen it.
More likely one partner just falls asleep in the middle because they can't deal. The other one cries himself to sleep, and that's how it ends.
Exactly.
It's
So
true.
have a curfew, people. 11 p.m. is a good time. Of course, do whatever works for you. But I can tell you, once you're in the AMs, early AMs, no one's gonna win, and it's gonna feel shitty all around. Yeah. Sleep is your friend.
Yes. So again, going back to center, doing what you need to ground yourself, figure out the things that are going to help you feel some sense of control. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday, and we're talking about how sometimes in the middle of the workday, it's like, I'm just going to stop and do the dishes right now, or I'm going to clean up my desk, and that's not on the to-do list, but it feels like something with that I can see the finished product. And if that's what you need to do, if you need to get up and clean something so that you have some sense of control in this world and this country where it feels like everything is out of control, that's okay. Do that thing. Do the little whiteboard challenge.
Stretch.
Right. Physically move.
Stretch. Yeah.
The other suggestion I would say is around giving people grace. I was assuming that she should know exactly what I needed in that moment. Right before we joined this podcast, I was having a call with a client who is struggling with some coworkers and the tension in that space. And she feels as if her work is not being acknowledged. And when they ask her a question, she's taking it as a criticism. Because she doesn't, what she would want them to say is, you've done really great work on this. I love this. This is fantastic. I actually just have 2 questions about it. And then say the questions. And then she would respond differently. But when they respond just with the questions, what she hears is, you have missed these 2 things. Like, clearly you're not looking at this close enough because I picked out these 2. So one of my suggestions to her was, insert the thing that you wish they would have said. When you read it, read to yourself, man, that was a great job that you did here. This is really good work. I just have 2 questions for you. And then read their questions. And the way in which you're going to respond energetically is just going to be so different than if you see that as a criticism. And I'm trying to do that myself. I'm trying to hear people's words in a way that I want to have charitable assumption and assume that they mean well, and I will then respond accordingly. So part of it, I think, is also just finding grace with each other.
For sure. And knowing really the only thing that you can control is your own reaction to things. So you can choose that. Hopefully you can find yourself in your wise mind, and you can do things like, what you're saying is like a type of reframing. You're just like, you pick your own adventure. You read an email and you interpret it the way that you want to interpret it. You add the parts that you want to add, and you get whatever you want out of it, because you want to, you have control and choice over how you react to things.
Right. We're doing that anyway. In our minds, we're like, oh, you see there, they don't even care about what I did. They don't care about my work. They don't care about, or my partner hasn't seen that I did the dishes, that I cleaned. They don't recognize that I've taken care of the kids, and there's this whole backstory to what you often say is the story in my head. So there is a story in your head. Try to find the good one. Rewrite it, choose your own adventure. Go through the blue door instead of the green door, and choose a better story.
Exactly. And if it's helpful, if you can, we talk about this a lot here. Saying I have a story in my head and then finishing that sentence is so powerful, because you can extract what you have chosen subconsciously, unconsciously, and now you can say, okay, I want to make up a new story. And I don't mean in this like delirium sort of, completely detached from reality. But once you have established that you've already made up a story, you can make up you can adjust that story to sort of get to whatever you want. So
that person is not the villain. Yes.
Right. Exactly. And you value your you value your own work enough that you don't need to be validated with other people, and that their question is a reflection of their confusion. You can make up whatever story.
Exactly.
And it's and that goes within relationships. I think when you are feeling like your partner isn't showing up for you, and you sort of feeling more and more needy, more and more clingy, articulate the story. I have a story in my head that you're going to leave me. I have a story in my head that you don't love me anymore. I have a story in my head that, I, whatever, just like, and articulated in the context of the story, whether you articulate to them or articulate to yourself in your own private experience. You're like, I have a story in my head that my partner is going to leave me. And then you can look at that story and see, is that true? Is that really, like, how true is it? How true is it?
Yeah.
Or does it feel real? Does it feel like it's going to happen like there and then? Is it something that you can bring up with your partner? Once you sort of name that story, you have choices. You have options.
Yeah. And naming it to yourself is really important. For a while, it took me some time to even believe that was true. I show up very strong in the world. I am all of 4'9". I am look younger than I am. I have big energy, I think, to compensate
Tiny
for
and
all that
mighty.
tininess. Yeah. And in every meeting that I am in through Zoom throughout the course of the day, I am likely leading all of them, or I'm directing the work, or I'm big in my smallness. And so when I would think of myself as someone who is clingy or needy, I was like, absolutely not. That does not fit the narrative. And the reality is that because I was so big in the world, I wanted a soft spot at home to land and feel comforted and taken care of. And when that felt threatened, when it felt like I wouldn't have that, is when I did feel unsafe. And so it's recognizing the dichotomy that both things can be true. That you can be someone who loves connection, but also feels overwhelmed by people and pull away. That you could be someone who is very strong in who they are and still feels wildly insecure in your relationship because you feel like that dynamic is unsafe. So just frankly naming it for yourself first, and then being able to have the vulnerability and the courage to name to your partner, this is what's happening for me. This is the story in my head right now.
Yeah, and sometimes you get the feedback you get when you do that, and especially if you have established a good foundation of communication, which is just worth doing regardless of what's happening. And when you sort of say, have a story in my head that whatever you name, and you get some feedback, I think it can be enlightening. It could be you could suddenly realize, oh my God, like I'm so far off the mark. But if you don't name it, you're just gonna keep going round and round in circles. You can say, I have a story in my head that you're angry with me, and that's why you're not talking to me. And the other person can be like, whoa, wow, I'm sorry that's happening for you. I am just preoccupied because I'm still trying to figure out this email that I have to write to management tomorrow. Like it could just be simple as that. And if you don't name it, or like, I'm worried about the elections, I'm worried about my job, right? There's like so much is happening in people's psyche right now. It can show up as you don't love me, or you don't want to connect with me. If that's where we allow ourselves to go, in the same way that is somebody who's sort of experiencing a partner being clingy and needy, you can name that too, and gently you can be like, listen, sounds like I have a story in my head that you have all these expectations from me and you want me to show up a certain way. How's that working out for you? Like, what's going on? And the other person can check in with themselves and be like, yeah, I just realized I'm putting a lot of pressure on you. So these are all really important conversations that can be had if you have a good, sense of good, strong foundation of communication. If you really name things from your point of view, a lot of I statements, we talk about a lot of I statements, but it's really narrating your own experience and being mindful of leaving a bit of a space for things to be different, to remain curious and flexible, that realize that, the human brain makes up stories. We only have, one angle on things. On that note, actually, I do this fun exercise, and I actually did the other day, which blew some people's minds, and I just want to tell you about it. Actually, now I tell you about it. If I do it, people will know my secret. But I have it's a good one. So I have a mug that the handle is broken, and it's an old mug. I keep it because it's like I heart New York mug, and I like it. But the handle's broken, so I keep it, and I keep it in my desk. Sometimes this is what I do. I put it on a desk. I'll tell the person to look away or close their eyes, and I put it on a desk. So this works with either one person or two people. So if it's one person, I put it on a desk and put the handle away from them so they can't see it. Or if it's two people, I put the mug so that one person can see the handle and the other person can't. Then I let them look at the mug, and then I ask them to mime drinking out of this mug. So often, the person who can't see the handle will mime as if they're holding a mug from a handle to drink out of it, right? And the person who can see the broken handle will mime with their hands around the mug to drink it, like holding the mug itself and not the handle, right? And then of course I show the mug and how the handle's missing, because there's like, and in that moment people are just like, whoa, that's like a huge difference. And that is just to illustrate that we just have our own experience, we just have our own angle, and then we interpret the world like knowing what we know, and it could be different because we might just be seeing this one thing from different angles. So just be mindful about the mug.
Yeah, I like it. That's what I think takeaway. Be mindful about the mug. We should do some Curious Fox merch and have, which we're going to be doing soon, by the way, a little hint, but and then have a mug and break the handle on all of them. And then just say, be mindful of your perspective, be mindful about the mug. Yes.
Yeah, totally.
So
or we can send the people and then with an instruction saying, break the handle.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we talked about, all right, there's a few different things. So we are in a time right now and place in the world where there's a lot of stress, and not anecdotally, right? Like scientifically, it has been measured that we are stressed out and unhappy and afraid. And as a result of that, we know that that is manifesting inside of our physical bodies. That means it's manifesting in our relationships and our homes. And so a way to then that shows up in either us being clingy potentially or avoiding each other if we have not handled our attachment style. And so some of the things we talked about are self-care, connecting with people who feel safe, offering support to people after you have taken care of yourself, right? So not taking care of someone when you're in the struggle, doing things that bring you joy, music, dance, watching movies, positive affirmations for yourself. Don't wait for someone to say that was a great email. Just know that was a badass email. If you're waiting for that, I'm going to tell you right now, I am saying to you, that email that you wrote was fantastic. That presentation that you did this week, that was incredible. The way that you cleaned that kitchen, that's beautiful. The way that you helped your kid with that math homework, that's really remarkable. Good job. You just got some stars.
Well done.
So get some affirmations and then communicate clearly, name the story in your head. And I think it says then be present. That is my meditate. That is my intention every morning so far. The past few weeks is just to be present.
It's hard work.
It is hard work.
It's hard work. Worth it, but it's hard work.
Yeah. Some of the things I don't want to be present to, but I'm trying.
Right now, yeah. I mean, it's just so much comfier and nicer in my dream world.
Yeah.
But be present. It's better for you.
So you will hear this after the election. So future selves, hopefully it turned out well. Message to future Jacqueline and Effy. Everything's great over here in the future. It all turned out exactly as we wanted it to.
There's peace in the world.
There's peace. The cure for COVID fell from the sky overnight and we're all good and the world has opened up. But wherever you are, honestly, we hope a lot of safety and joy finds you. We are not trying to undermine the fact that these are really scary and bizarre times. And hopefully this is a place that you can come to find some friendly voices, some curious voices, to find some community. If you are looking for community, we encourage you, go on to We Are Curious Foxes and go find us on Facebook. Find the group there, have some conversations, talk with us, go to Instagram. We Are Curious Foxes there as well. We've been posting more stories and pictures and posts, and you can communicate and dialogue with us there. If you have enjoyed this conversation and you think more people should be listening to these types of conversations and you are interested in changing the noise and making a difference and having a positive change, you can do that right now by just picking up your phone and pressing like or follow or 5 stars or share. Just do one of those things, not even all of them, because this is COVID and everyone's tired. Choose one of those things and just do it right now. Take a minute. It'll make a difference to us. We are really pouring into this podcast and creating community through this work. And so that would mean a lot to us. And go on to Patreon. We are updating our Patreon tiers so that patrons will get more access to the behind the scenes and be able to ask our guests questions, which we've never done before, and a bunch of other cool stuff. And then let us know if there are things that you want us to be talking about, if there are particular struggles that are coming up in your relationships or joys or things that you want to share out that are amazing. You can give us a call at 201-870-0063. Or you can shoot us an email at listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com.
This episode is produced and edited by the immensely talented Nina Pollock. Our intro music is composed by Dave Saha. We are, as always, grateful for their work. And thank you for listening. And as always, stay curious, friends. Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.